Kamusta? Ready ka na ba para sa lesson natin ngayong week? Welcome to our English class. Before we start, here are some reminders. I-read ang iyong ballpen, answer sheet, at ang iyong module. Basahin at unawain maigi ang mga instructions sa bawat learning task. Iwasang magusot, madumihan, mapunit, at higit sa lahat ang mawala ang iyong module. Magpagabay lamang kay mami, daddy, ate, kuya o kung sino mang nakatatanda sa iyo. Ikaw pa rin dapat ang sasagot sa bawat learning task. Huwag kalimutang isulat ang pangalan at section sa iyong answer sheets. Pwedeng i-pause ang video para mas mabasa o maunawaan mo ang mga instructions. Kung may tanong, gaya nga ng sabi ng lola ni Cardo, huwag mahihiyang magtanong.
Last week, we talked about adjectives. This week, our lesson is about simple present tense of verbs. At the end of this lesson, you are expected to use simple present tense of verbs. To start with our lesson, let us read this selection. Andre joins his online class for 2 hours every day. He uses his tablet for video conferencing with his teacher and classmates. He sometimes borrows his brother's laptop. After his daily online class, he opens his module to answer the target learning tasks for the day. Sometimes, his parents help him whenever he has some questions about the lesson. Now, it's your turn to read the selection. What is being talked about in the selection? What does Andre do every day according to the selection? For our first learning task on page 23, identify the correct verb form to be used in each statement. Choose from the options in the parentheses. For example, the school have various academic programs. The correct verb form has. The school has various academic programs. Let us go back to the selection that we have read earlier. Have you noticed the highlighted words? These words express actions. These are called verbs. Verbs are words that show action. Simple present tense indicates present condition, habitual action, or general truth. Here are some things to consider in forming the present tense of verbs. Singular subjects. Most verbs form their simple present tense by adding s to the base form of the verb. For example, Enrico draws his masterpiece. The verb here is the word draws. Since we have a singular subject, we add s to the base form of the verb. Verbs ending in the following form their present tense by adding es to the base form of the verb. For example, she brushes her teeth 3 times a day. The verb here is the word brushes. Since it ends in sh, we add es to the base form of the verb. Verbs ending in y preceded by a vowel form their present tense by adding s to the base form of the verb. For example, Christine buys vitamins for her family. The verb here is the word buys. It ends in y, which is preceded by the vowel u, so we add s to the base form of the verb. Verbs ending in y, preceded by consonants, form their present tense by changing y to I and adding es. For example, my father dries his harvested crops. Anthony copies the lesson. The verbs here are dries and copies. They both end in Y that is preceded by a consonant, so we change Y to I and we add ES. Pronoun I and you. The pronoun I, when used in a sentence, uses am and takes the base form of the verb. I prepared this report for our class. The verb here is the word prepare. The pronoun you always takes the base form of the verb. For example, you write a letter to your teacher. The verb here is the word write. Be verb is, are, and am. Singular subjects use is except for I that uses am. Plural subjects use are. You are our sponsor for this activity. The verb here is the word are. I am a dentist. The verb here is the word am. Arlene is a helpful classmate. The verb here is the word is. Learning task 2 on page 25. Choose the correct form of the verb in each statement. For example, number 1. Every Filipino does his/her share of serving his/her country. The correct form of the verb, does. Every Filipino does his/her share of serving his/her country. Learning task 3. Fill in each blank with the correct simple present form of each verb in the parentheses. For example, the children blank sure of their chosen games. The correct simple present form of the verb are. The children are sure of their chosen games. Learning task 4 on page 25. Use the correct simple present tense of verbs ending in Y inside the parentheses. For example, it is Steve who always blank for our snacks. The correct form, pays. Learning task 5 on pages 25 to 26. Arrange the jumbled letters to form the present tense of verbs for singular and plural nouns. For example, she blank her grandma and grandpa. The answer is Mrs. Learning task 6 on page 26. Complete the sentences below by supplying appropriate verbs in their simple present tense. Learning task 7 on page 26. Put a check if the form of the verb written in bold letters is correct. Put an X if it is wrong. Final activity on page 26. How do you and your family protect yourselves from catching a virus? Compose a clear and coherent sentences using the given simple present verbs below. Use I, we, and my family as options for the subject. I hope that you learned and understood our lesson for this week. Just remember, if the subject is singular, we add s or es to the base form of the verb. If it is plural, we just use the base form of the verb. See you again next week!